The RMS Titanic, along with everything inside of her, rested at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean for 8 decades before it was discovered and later salvaged by underwater excavation teams. These pieces of history are now giving viewers a rare glimpse of life aboard the vessel, as well as a look at some of the ghostly spirits still haunting the doomed ship. The Titanic Artifact Exhibition, located at the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas, has proven to be a breeding ground for paranormal activity. There are over 300 displays at the exhibit, some of which apparently maintained their connection to the passengers that once possessed them. Scary stories about the exhibits continue to pour in from staff at the exhibit and visitors alike. Here are 6 of the spookiest Titanic ghost stories. Number 6. The Lady in Black. Eyewitnesses have seen a ghost wandering the grand staircase of the Titanic Artifact Exhibition of the Luxor Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. Both guests and employers at the exhibit claim to have seen the woman, who is dressed in a black period dress with a white collar and her hair done up in a bun. A photographer preparing for the opening of the exhibit spotted the woman walking down the staircase. The photographer was startled at first because he hadn't seen anyone else enter the area, and the staircase itself had been roped off. He shrugged it off and assumed that she was just a part of the exhibit about to take place. He asked if she would like to be photographed, but she ignored him. He continued setting up his equipment, and the woman suddenly appeared behind him. He offered once again to photograph her, and this time she did a little more than just ignore him. She vanished into thin air, right in front of him. Number 5. The exhibit ghosts. A number of guests and workers at the exhibit have felt, heard and seen paranormal activity while inside the exhibition. This paranormal activity includes feelings like someone is following behind you, and there have been sightings of actual ghosts. One of the most bizarre events at the exhibition happened with a photo of Bruce Ismay, who was an English businessman and chairman and managing director of the White Star Line that owned the Titanic. As the morning crew opened up the exhibit, they found a photo of Bruce Ismay laying on the floor, leaning against a wall, and completely undamaged. The manager of the exhibit reviewed surveillance footage to discover how this photo wound up there and who placed it there, but the footage only created more questions than answers. He watched as the picture started shaking and was then very gently moved to the floor, but no one was around, yet it seemingly moved itself. Number 4. The Curse of the Titanic. A number of claims that the Titanic was cursed emerged after it sank. The press were quick to link this Titanic curse with the fact that White Star Line, the company behind the ship, didn't christen their ships before launching them. The most popular legend about the curse is linked to the sectarianism of Belfast itself, the city the ship was constructed in. It was suggested the ship was given the number 390904, which spells out the letters No Pope when reflected. The term No Pope was a sectarian slogan used to attack Roman Catholics. It was popular among the extreme Protestants of Northern Ireland, where the ship was constructed. The region was particularly sectarian at the time, and so it was alleged that the ship sinking was because the people putting her together, the Harland and Wolff Company, were anti-Catholic. Their workforce was almost exclusively Protestant, and the company had a history of alleged hostility towards Catholics. The company were known to hire very few Catholics, but it's unknown if this was a deliberate anti-Catholic move on their part because their Belfast-based shipyard was in Protestant East Belfast, which is probably why very few Catholics were involved with the building of the ship. The RMS Olympic and Titanic were next to each other on the yard, given the numbers 400 and 401 respectively. This was an obvious case of Protestant versus Catholic superstition, as the RMS Olympic was in service for almost 25 years without any curse attached. Number 3. The Lookout Watcher. Frederick Fleet was a British sailor who served as the lookout for the RMS Titanic. He saw the deadly iceberg and issued a warning to the bridge. His warning came too late, however, as the ship was going much too fast to avoid colliding with the ice. Fleet would survive the sinking of the Titanic, but he suffered from depression afterwards. Following the death of his wife not long after Christmas in 1964, Fleet was evicted by his brother-in-law and committed suicide by hanging himself in the garden. Fleet's grave was unmarked until 1993, when the Titanic Historical Society had a headstone erected for him. It seems that the spirit of the Lookout Watcher isn't at peace though. Witnesses claim that they have seen him keeping watch over the promenade deck of the Las Vegas exhibition, perhaps driven by guilt to maintain his vigil even in death. Number 2. The Ghost of Captain Smith. According to the owners of the former home of Captain Edward John Smith, the captain of the Titanic, the ghost of the shipmaster still lives in the house. The couple, Neil and Louise Bonner, owned the 19th century Victorian and rented it out, where tenants of the property reported feeling an icy chill pass through them, hearing unexplained noises and even seeing an apparition of the captain himself. There's also been flooding in the kitchen and unexpected gusts of wind in the dining room. Mr. Bonner says that they were once renting out the place to a man who lived by himself. The man called them to tell them that he had seen the ghost of Captain Smith drifting across the room while he laid in bed. Number 1. The Belfast Museum Ghost. The Irish like to say that although they built the Titanic, it was sunk by the English. The Titanic Belfast Museum pays homage to the ship in Belfast, Ireland, and the place seems to have a haunting presence of its own. A woman going through a tour of the museum in 2013 listened to the final distress call sent out by the Titanic. She described what happened to her next in a letter that she sent to the hosts of the Real Ghost Stories online podcast. The woman claimed that as she was listening to the Morse code and reading the translated sounds of the distress call, she found herself overwhelmed with emotion. Her heart raced and she suddenly felt so heartbroken and anxious. It was as if she was the radio controller sending out the call, knowing it was too late. She felt sick to her stomach and began to cry. She walked away from the exhibit to get some air and felt a hand on her shoulder and a reassuring male voice tell her it's okay. She assumed that the voice came from her friend, and she reached up to brush his hand and then realised there was no one standing there. Had she been contacted by the spirit of Jack Phillips, the actual radio controller? Was he giving her some reassurance that he came to terms with the tragedy and was at peace now?